we have some questions that are a little bit more specific, some that are general, and so we're trying to do these interviews so that we can not have to have you come in every couple of weeks to go through what is essentially the same thing.
I don't mind.
All right. Well, thank you for your time. And so we're each going to end up asking, each council member each ask 2 questions. And so we'll just rotate through a couple of times. And we're going to start at that end of the table with Mr. Nephew.
Good evening. So the first question that I'm going to ask is, what motivated you to apply for a commission position?
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, my name is Diana Longry, and I live at 1771 Burr Street. I'm also a business owner in Maplewood at 1321 Frost Avenue. And so depending upon which commission we're talking about, what motivated me to apply for the Police Civil Service Commission is I feel I have the background to be able to help the city in this particular commission. My background is I'm an attorney, but in particular, I have the opportunity as an attorney to work with law enforcement agencies and law enforcement officers, sometimes on either side of the coin, depending upon, sometimes I'm a defense attorney, sometimes I'm the attorney for a victim, and I'm their advocate. So sometimes it just depends on what the situation is. Also, if you're looking at the Police Civil Service Commission, of course, one of the duties, as I understand it, for the Police Civil Service, of course, is to look at the various qualifications for various applicants to our police force. Now, before I was an attorney, I worked for a food service, and I was a regional field training sales manager. And part of what I did in that capacity is I did review applicants to the position and interviewed them and looked at their background, and I think that that skill of mine certainly would be able to translate that to this position. And certainly with regard to generally why I would apply to a commission is because, well, I enjoy working in municipal government. I enjoy working with other people, and I really like Maplewood.
Mara, go ahead.
What do you think are the major challenges for law enforcement in Maplewood today?
That's kind of a big question, because it depends on which part of their job is the challenge. Certainly, I think that out in the field, one of their biggest challenges is being able to feel like they can be community policing and at the same time be enforcing the law. Because there is 2 different aspects I see to being a police officer. One is being that community person who's out there who is indeed helping people to resolve their disputes, whether or not if it's 2 neighbors having a conflict, being that community person out there who is sort of the peacekeeper, the peacemaker. But then there's also that aspect of being a police officer where you also have to be the enforcing officer, where you have to enforce the laws. And I think that that, of course, is there's always that challenge between balancing the 2 of them.
In the way of just kind of a general question, which I'll be very interested to see what your answer is on this, I guess. How would you react if you felt strongly about what the Commission should be recommending to the Council and you were in the minority or perhaps the only member opposed to the views of the rest of the body? So the question is, how would you react?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think it's a very valid question because I think all voices should be heard. Everybody counts, everybody matters. And even if you're a minority voice, you should be given that opportunity to be able to speak and to be able to set forth those reasons why you might be the minority viewpoint. Because keep in mind, all these commissions, they're all advisory to the council. And while the council generally does follow the commission's findings or recommendations, sometimes they do not, because sometimes they are indeed persuaded by the minority opinion. And so that, of course, is important for the council to be able to hear both the majority opinion and the minority opinion, and to be able to hear exactly the rationale for both. Because maybe council members may have different things that they consider when they're making their final decision that maybe either commissioners didn't think about or wasn't something that was important, that was on the commission's plate, so to speak, because sometimes council members do have other things that are priorities that are different than what commission members may know of.
Thank you.
My question is related to the Betsy.
Mhm.
So how can the city of Maplewood work to better assist existing businesses, attract new businesses, and market the city as a premier business location?
Okay, great question. I love that question. Certainly, I think my background lends itself very well for this particular commission, the Betsy Commission. Reason being is that I've already told you about my experience of being a regional field training sales manager, so I understand about marketing, about what businesses need in order to be able to prosper, and how to try to market what they have to offer to our community. Two, I worked for Target Corporation for 8.5 years in their commercial real estate department. Okay? And doing that work, I learned several things. First of all, I learned what are some of the things important to retailers when they're looking at location, when they're looking at what kinds of other services that they want around them to make it work for them to put a store in a particular location. But also, working in the commercial real estate end of it, I learned a lot about commercial real estate in general, and some of the things you need to consider when you're looking at commercial real estate and you're trying to encourage businesses to come to your community. Certainly, as an attorney, I'm a general practice, small practice, a solo practitioner here in Maplewood. So I am a small business here in Maplewood, so I think that I have a handle on a lot of the things that my fellow small business owners are looking for. I certainly feel that one of the things that I can help with is looking at how to reach out to, particularly to small businesses in our community. One of the things I think that Maplewood should do, and I have mentioned this several times before, and even at the recent Citizens Forum I shared this with Councilmember Copen, is that the Minnesota Department, the University of Minnesota Extension Service, that they have a particular service that they offer, that cities and other cities have used this. I believe Hugo is one of them recently that has, where they will come in and they will look at what your businesses that you have within your community, look at what other kinds of businesses you may want to encourage to your community to build synergy, and to look at the future, the trends, because your demographics have a lot to do with what businesses do you want to encourage to come to your community. Because if your demographics are trending towards one way, you'll want to be sure that you have businesses that come to your community that will serve those demographics. And so that is something that they do, and they do it at a very reasonable price. And how I found out about them was simply through one of the League of Minnesota City conferences, and I'm sure maybe you've even come across them at the conferences you've attended as well.
Can I follow up?
Sure.
So if I heard correctly, you had a very specific suggestion about the University of Minnesota, but the question was, how can the city of Maplewood work to better assist existing businesses, attract new businesses, and market the city? And so you're
Right. Well, certainly you need to have your background information first, so you know what kind of businesses you have in your community.
Okay.
So once you know more about the businesses you have in your community, then you can take that next step. And then you can say, okay, we have a little niche market in Maplewood that we didn't know about, the dental business of, building things for the dental industry. Maybe we have that. I don't know. Wouldn't it be interesting to find out if we did? And if we did, what are some of the other niche markets that may indeed go hand in hand with that? But you need to find out what your baseline is first. And I think, generally speaking, though, you need to be a business-friendly community where you encourage maybe business owners to come forward to the city, especially to the Betsy, and maybe, have, maybe the Betsy can hold, forums or something to have special groups of business owners to come to talk about what their concerns are. Because I know that it sounds like there is some one-on-one going on, but there again, we talked about that a little bit at the Citizens Forum, and it wasn't really fleshed out too much, so I never really heard too much about where you're really at with that.
Great. Thank you.
We'll bounce back to police civil service now.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, do you feel you have a working knowledge of Maplewood Police Department?
I would think I do probably more than the average person on the street here in Maplewood.
Okay. So with that in mind, what do you think is the most important function of Maplewood's Police Civil Service Commission?
Of the Police Civil Service Commission?
What's the most important
Well,
function?
it is established by state law. And certainly what its duty is set forth in law, so I think it has to stick to those parameters.
But which function of it do you think is you personally think is most important?
The one that I think is the most important, because it's the one that they focus on the most and that they use and they do the most, is to review the various applicants and to help the personnel department and the police chief in their selection, because it is very important, I believe, to have police officers that fit well for our community, that will stay here so we have longevity in our police force and stability in our police force.
Thank you. Excuse me, thank you.
So, round two.
We're in round two, yep.
My second question is jumping down to the Civil Service Commission. It is to ask you to tell us about your experience in dealing with confidential personnel matters.
Okay, well, that's a good question. I would certainly say that as a regional field training sales manager, there was, because it was a private employer rather, you don't obviously spread information about fellow employees to, each other and that kind of thing, obviously. So certainly you do keep the information about your employees confidential, their personal information. Certainly as an attorney, I have a duty of attorney-client confidentiality, and so every day I probably have occasion exercise that. And I think that in many ways that is very similar, because you may indeed find yourself where you have, somebody who comes in, they're your client, you have your confidential information that you're talking about. And then they, of course, will refer their friend to you, and their friend comes in and tells you about their issue, and then offhandedly they'll say, I'm really happy that Jane sent me over here. So anyway, how is Jane doing on her will? And of course you have to say, you know what, I'm sorry, but I can't talk about Jane's will, but you know what, why don't you ask Jane and maybe she'll tell you, but I'm not in that position that I can do that. See, so I would say that certainly in my day-to-day profession, I certainly have to practice that, and certainly having been previously an elected official, there's certainly times when you have confidential information that may come before you that, it isn't shared with other people.
Going back to the Betsy, are there any specific locations in Maplewood you'd like to see the city to work proactively to encourage redevelopment?
You know, I think where you need to focus on in Maplewood with regard to those